Please pray with me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts draw us closer to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This might not take too much imagination, but imagine a week from now, maybe 2 weeks, could even be 3 weeks from now. And like Colleen's sister, you've been evacuated from your home of many, many years. And the barricades finally come down, and they say it's safe to re-enter the neighborhood, and you think you know what you're going to see, but you don't know what you're going to see, and you don't know what you're going to find. And you flip around on the radio, and you hit some preacher who says these words from Isaiah. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. Well, I'm telling you, there might be cussing. Not from my sister-in-law. She's the nicest person on earth. But if it were me in that car, waiting to see, and I heard this text, I'm not sure I would find it of comfort. And guess what? Isaiah was speaking to people in almost exactly the same situation. This is from 2nd Isaiah, which most scholars will tell you is kind of at the end of the exile and before they have returned to their homeland. And of course, exile isn't exactly evacuation, but evacuation is the closest experience most of us will have to true exile, except for Dan, who knows what exile looks like. I always have to make that caveat. Dan has actually been exiled. But the rest of us know a little bit about evacuation. Either we've taken evacuees into our home or occasionally had to evacuate or have friends who evacuated. So they're going back and they don't know what they're going to find. They don't know what they're going to find, and the prophet Isaiah says, "Fear not. God has given you a name, maybe a name you don't even know. I've loved you and called you by name. You are mine." So at first glance, you might say, wow, tone-deaf God, tone-deaf prophetic. Well, prophets are rarely comforting creatures. The first thing you hear from a prophet is usually exactly what you don't want to hear. That's kind of how it makes, if you want to make the prophetic literature, say something that really ticks everybody off. But be deeper. Have something that is more important below the initial words. And that's what's so important about naming and words. What you call something pretty much makes it what it is, as we got from our quote. And I know from the years that I worked in disaster ministry that the difference between a disaster and a catastrophe actually has legal ramifications. In this country, we've only really had one other catastrophe in my lifetime, and that was Hurricane Katrina. There is a chance that what is happening in the Southland, and I like to say the Southland because, first of all, that's what they say. They don't call themselves SoCal like we Northern Californians tend to call them. And it's not just Los Angeles. The people in San Diego and Orange County, basically anybody south of San Luis Obispo is in harm's way, potential harm's way. So the Southland, these fires may turn out to be a catastrophe, not just a disaster, in terms of people affected and structures destroyed. Although we are so grateful that the death toll isn't higher. And that's the people on with certain political agendas will not tell you the truth about that. Not only was Los Angeles prepared, Los Angeles is doing a heck of a job. Almost no one died. Hello? That's a big deal. When you lose all of the Palisades and you have more people in your county than most states, and you only have 16 people died, I would say that says a lot about LAFD and CAL FIRE and the Canadians and the Oregonians and CON FIRE and Idaho and Mexico and Nevada. And this morning I got a text from a friend of mine I went to seminary with saying her youngest child, who's in the Colorado National Guard, is going to the Southland. I remember him when he was 4. And now who knows? He might be standing at that roadblock when my sister and brother-in-law go back up the canyon in La Cañada to find out what happened. It matters what name you call yourself. The book we're now reading in Live Edge Readers, The Untethered Soul, spends a lot of time talking about all the noise in our heads and the negative self-talk, which is sometimes called the bad roommate, that's constantly telling you you're not good enough and things are not going to be okay and blah, 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 blah. Also might call you by all kinds of nasty names. So my invitation to you today is to try and take this in, that God has a secret name. I started to say, Tim, I heard there was a secret chord. I considered it, and I thought, and I know you thank me for not doing that, but I kept thinking of that. There's a secret chord. There is a name that we don't even know, of a soul that is more precious to the Holy One than all the things listed here, and transcends whether we live or die, whether we have a home or don't have a home. And we don't often get the ability to hear these scriptures the way they were initially heard. But today, maybe we get a glimpse of what it might mean to be told, even after this exile, even after your captivity, you're going home, and no matter what you find, I have called you by name and you are mine. And the love of the Holy One for you transcends whatever your earthly circumstances are. This is the reason it might offend us at first, is because most of us don't believe in an interventionist God who's just going to kind of pick you up and pull you out of the water. No, we believe in evacuations and science and doing the work ourselves, recognizing that we don't get holy rescue necessarily in a physical sense, but perhaps in a sense of wisdom and intelligence and knowledge. Do we work together, recognizing that every other single person also has a secret name from God and is beloved? And so We rescue ourselves, our communities, and when we work together, the Holy One is made manifest. When the Mexicans and the Canadians and the people from Idaho and Colorado and New Mexico and Nevada and Northern California, when everyone gets on the fire line and does their job, God is in the midst of them. And when we look like Mr. Rogers, and I like to call him Reverend Rogers, because never forget that Fred Rogers was a Presbyterian minister, ordained for many years. When we think about Reverend Rogers, who was once asked, how do you talk about disasters to children? He said, I say to them, look for the helpers. Put your energy, put your love into the helpers. To the first responders, to the people who are taking in relatives and friends and maybe even strangers, to the people who have Airbnbs that might even be an important part of their income, who now have long-term non-paying tenants. Although Airbnb will reimburse them to a certain extent, but they're going to put aside that in order to help those who need a place to be. Look for the helpers and tune out the noise, the people who make fun of people who've lost their homes, the people who say that our governor is failing when he is doing God's work. Thank you very much. Talk about a helper. The people who will add fuel to the flames, fuel of hate. Do not listen to them. Fear not, for I, the Holy One, am with you. I love you, and you are mine. So even though today we have friends in harm's way, and we had a pretty good earthquake this morning that certainly woke the dog up. Maybe you all, did you feel it on this side of the hill? It was in Concord. It was 3.9, and whoo, it gave us a good shake in El Sobrante. It felt literally like going, it was one of those. There was a lot of rattling, but no rocking or rolling. It was mostly just a rattle. I literally felt like the house had just been shook like that. And poor Tasia was like, it woke me up. It said, do not succumb to the despair and the fear. Any day, it could be any one of us. The work is still the same whether you're in harm's way or not. Even if we can hear this a little differently today, maybe we can hear it a little deeper. Maybe we can recognize that fear does not serve us. That fear only holds us back no matter what the situation. I have to admit, I have been very afraid of trying to get this church finished and opened and everything else. At times, I have succumbed and forgotten that there's some kind of secret name, secret chord that was whispering in my ear and said, you know what? Church could be more than just Sunday gatherings. Church could be a cafe where everyone is welcome, genuinely welcome, regardless of their ability to pay. Church could be honoring local artists and farms. Church could be being in partnership with a nursery that has rare plants and trees and a staff that is folks hard to employ or formerly incarcerated. Church could be having a farmer's market, becoming the center of a whole community. Church could be more. But somehow I have to remember, and we have to remember, that there might be raging waters, and lousy contractors and a need for more money and all kinds of things that we just have to keep going. As Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And we have done it for nearly 6 years. And we're going to keep going. And we don't know in the end exactly what it's going to look like. In the same way that all those folks evacuated don't know what, if anything, they go back to or what happens next. Because that's really our situation in life. That earthquake this morning could have been followed by a big one. That little rattle could have been followed by a big one, and we could have been right in the stew too. So this is not meant to be a bummer, but it's meant to be maybe at the moment when you're not completely under threat, to claim your name. Listen to the small voice. Find out what it might be. Not all of us, Tim, have the luxury, and I'll call it a luxury even though I think it, you earned it, of having a spiritual teacher who will give you a name to live into. That is your name, will be your name, and at some point you'll stop cringing when you say it out loud. Not everyone knows that. But we all have equally marvelous names. And the Holy One might just whisper it to you. And that might just carry you through whatever is next. And we don't even know what's next. So, dear friends, the invitation is to listen for your holy name. And if you hear it, savor it. Be it. Let it fill you up and make you the beloved who knows that you are the child of the Holy One. Amen.